Hello, everyone. I'm Dominique.
And I'm Christina, and we are the Connected in Glass podcast.
Every week, we will feature interviews with glass artists who speak to their creative processes and overcoming challenges.
These conversations are real and raw. We hope that by sharing these stories, you're able to find some connection and know that you're not alone. We just wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening to our podcast. We're super passionate about this project and work for hours every week to bring you this content. So if you'd like to help support us, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/connectedinglass. Also, please consider joining our Facebook group, Connected in Glass Community, where we continue the conversations from these episodes. We'd love to hear from you. Today, we're interviewing Liz Crawford. Liz is a glass artist from Cannon, New York, who has been working full-time with furnace glass since 1999. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Hi,
Thanks for joining
everyone.
us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So to start, we want to learn about you. Maybe skip the glass part of your life right now. Tell us where you live, what you enjoy, and kind of work us into your life with glass.
Okay, so my name is Liz Crawford. I live in Cannon, New York, which is a border town that borders the Berkshires, right on the border with Massachusetts. And I'm married to a glass blower as well. My husband, Nathan, we work together. We've been partners since the late 90s. We have two kids, two beautiful kids. I have a 16-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter. And I love to garden. I have a big veggie garden and a bunch of perennial gardens. I love to go bike riding. We live on a lake, very close to Queechee Lake. So we do swimming, canoeing, and lots of hiking. We do lots of hiking around here too, because where we live, it's pretty rural. We're kind of in the woods. So there's not a lot, there's no downtown per se to hang out and around here without driving somewhere. So we do a lot of hiking. We have a dog and a cat, and we have 13 chickens. So we take care of chickens too, which is kind of exciting.
Big family.
It is. It's a lot to juggle for sure. But everything's really home-based here. So my husband, Nathan, and I built a studio in a separate building in our backyard. And so we're pretty contained here. We're in a bubble. We both have a nice short walk to work every day, and our kids are always around, and our pets are always around. So it's nice. It's great.
Yeah. And how did you get into glass? When did it all start?
Well, when I was a kid, my parents took me to see a glassblower working in Kent, Connecticut, in this really cool double-level barn studio. And I had never seen glassblowing before. My parents knew that I was very interested in glass bottles. And every time they took me to like a museum or an art show, I'd always go right to the glass. So they took me to see this glass blower working. And I just was blown away from, the first minute I had seen them working in there as a team. And my parents actually allowed me to take a workshop there. So I was 15 years old, and I took my first workshop, and it was just like, this is what I want to do with my life. And so I pursued it ever since then. I went through high school, and when I graduated, I didn't end up going to art school because I didn't think I was that much of an artist. Even though I wanted to be a glass blower, I didn't end up going to art school until a few years later. I did go ahead and I went to Massachusetts College of Art in Boston, and I studied glass there for a couple of years. And then I ended up just getting a job working full-time blowing glass. So that happened back in the late 90s. And strangely enough, the person I ended up working for was the same glassblower I had seen when I was 15. So 10 years later, I ended up working for the same person, which was pretty wild.
How did that connection get made? Just happenstance?
It was completely happenstance. So I had spent a lot of time at Mass Art in the hot shop. And, you know, every once in a while, people would like see job postings, and a friend of mine, one of my assistants in the shop down at Mass Art, had mentioned, hey, there's this glassblower looking for an assistant down in Sheffield, Massachusetts, in the Berkshires. And so I was just like, oh, well, maybe I should look into getting this job. It was like perfect timing for me, because at that point I had lived in Boston for 5 or 6 years. And there were really no glass blowing jobs. I was actually a full-time preschool teacher, believe it or not. And then I heard about this glass job just from my friend Leslie. And I drove out from Boston to the Berkshires, and I walked into this beautiful studio and gallery, and I worked there for a weekend and got hired. And that was it. So I've been working full-time in glass blowing studios since 1999 for, 4 different glass blowers, basically.
What did that first job entail? Like what were you doing?
So when I got the job, I was doing all of the starts. So the person I was working for had a pretty extensive product line. He made lamps, and they did a lot of cameo carved pieces, and lots of, spun out bowls and paperweights. He had a huge product line. So he was taking orders at the wholesale shows for all these products. And then he also had a gallery right on site there where he'd sell directly to people. So I was primarily doing all the gathering and coloring and all of the assisting for all of the glass work in there. But then he was also having me make all the paperweights, all of the pumpkins, all of the ornaments. So it was a lot of production, but I got really lucky in my position there because I was like the head assistant. And there were a lot of times where he part of the job was at the end of the week, I would get blow time. So I could make my own stuff. I could experiment. I could play in the shop without having the overhead of paying for the studio time. So that was part of the job too. So I got a lot of hands-on experience doing gathering and getting coloring right and, doing production and getting really good at that.
Okay, so take us on from there. You worked for 3 other artists, and when did you meet your husband?
So I met my husband in my first job there, strangely enough. He went ahead and just was living in an apartment just about a mile and a half from the studio where I was working. And since I had moved from Boston, I was actually living in the studio as well. I had no apartment yet. So I still had a lease in Boston. I was paying for an apartment in Boston, but I was living in this studio right above the hot shop. So my husband was just biking around the area, and he biked into the glass studio where I was working, and he walked in and we kind of chatted briefly, and he said, oh, I'm a glass blower too. And I work, in West Stockbridge, which was only like 20 miles away. And I said, oh, there's another hot shop. Like I didn't even realize there was this other glass studio. And he's like, oh yeah, I do production over there. And he's like, I was just checking this place out because it was near my apartment. And so we met each other, and I was like instantly intrigued. And I was like, oh, I want to go check out where you work. That's, very cool. And so that's where we actually met each other. And he ended up working part-time at the studio where I was working. And I ended up in turn eventually working part-time at the studio where he was working. So my full-time job kind of eventually petered out. And I ended up working over at Berkshire Center for Contemporary Glass, which is in West Stockbridge. And I worked there with a big team of glassblowers. My husband was one of them. I was one of them. We were like a pack of 6 people. And we all worked together making a bunch of, they had a huge on-site gallery as well. And we just did a bunch of production and made pieces that we shipped out from there as well. So I worked in Sheffield for a couple of years, and I worked in West Stockbridge for a couple of years. Then I also worked for this woman who had been blowing glass since the 70s out in Ghent, New York. And she and I also were doing a lot of productions. She had a line of glass ladybugs that were very, very popular, and we probably made hundreds of thousands of ladybugs. And they were from the furnace too, but there was like extensive cane drawing on them and all the grinding, and then of course all the shipping. So, you know, through all the places my husband and I worked together, he didn't work there, but I worked there. We learned a lot about the different business models as to how to run a glass studio. So.
Did you two start dating right away?
We kind of did. I mean, it was very interesting because I was very interested in, you know, getting to know him and hanging out. And it was very exciting because it was like my first glass blowing job. And here I met this other guy, and he was this glass blower. And we spent all of our free time. So at Berkshire Glass, they offered us free blow time as well. So anytime we got time in the studio, we worked together and we just played around and made whatever we wanted and tried new techniques. And so we're doing production all day and then, you know, working in the evenings, making some of our own stuff, which was really cool. And between the two of us, we amassed so much glass. Like we had so many pieces, and we were living in this tiny little apartment together. And at a certain point, we just had nowhere else to put all of our stuff. So we decided we're going to have a sale and try and sell all this stuff. So we did that. And it was just like this huge eye-opening experience for us because we sold so much glass. Like over the course of a weekend, we just put up some road signs and put out a tent with like tables full of glass. And it was very exciting.
In your free time, were you being creative, or were you still in production mode? Like, did you find your creativity in glass at that time?
Definitely. I think that during that whole experience, Nathan and I were really spending a lot of time just trying to figure out what we love to make, how to make certain things, how to use color, how to design glass, how to, you know, use all kinds of different techniques, because production is like an excellent foundation for glass making. You can really get good at making any shape, any style, work with different sizes, huge pieces, medium pieces, small pieces. And, you know, when we started in our own blow time, we would think of anything. So he and I both kept very extensive sketchbooks. So we did quite a bit of sketching and talking about ideas and trying things out. And of course, we would have friends who would be like, hey, can you make us like a set of drinking glasses? Or, hey, can you make this giant fish tank for us? Or, you know, everybody needed something. So we always had friends who were like, hey, can you try making us this or that? And then eventually we were using our blow time to make, you know, we would take commissions or orders from people, and people would come in with broken glass and we would make, you know, inserts and repairs. And we started actively selling our glass because we had made so many pieces together that we had to get rid of it. We couldn't keep it all because we didn't have anywhere to put any of it. So the hot shop where we were last working at, Berkshire Center for Contemporary Glass, had a gallery, and they started selling our work in there while we were working there, which was pretty great. was a great opportunity to make whatever we want and see what sold really well. And also helped us figure out what the price points were for our pieces and our work, based on everything else that was in the gallery and what kind of customers were coming in. Yeah.
And when you were going through those design processes and kind of figuring out what you enjoy making, were you drawing out your designs first? Were you just kind of going with it? What was your process?
So in some cases, we were doing drawings. I definitely kept a pretty extensive sketchbook, and so did Nathan. We would make things, and you guys probably know when you're making things, sometimes, things happen during the process and you're like, ooh, I really like this, or ooh, that didn't work well at all. So you kind of build on your skills. For a while I was making like these small teapots, and I was really loving the form, but I was having problems with the spout, or I was, the handles were not quite right. And so I think we played so much with form and with color that over the years, we came to like what we liked to make the most and what we could really refine, and the body of work that we make today is a good representation of all the years that we've spent making all kinds of different things. There are definitely pieces that we made when we first met each other that I wish we still had. We kept some of them, but a lot of them are just gone. But we were really good at photographing everything, and we have things on slides. And so we have like a really good record of all of the items we've ever made, which is kind of great. I always tell Nathan, I think we should have a book. Like, it'd be cool just for us to have like a coffee table book of all the pieces we've made, because, they're somewhere out there, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Okay, so take us to how you decided to like start a business together. I think that you're leading there, right? Like you started selling your work, and then you're like, oh, we want our own studio now.
Yeah, pretty much. So it was kind of a strange situation where Nathan and I had been dating probably for 5 years, and we had this little apartment, and we had a big fluffy dog, a husky, and we had a couple cats. And it was really hard for us to find a bigger place to live. For a while, we were like, maybe we should just move out to Seattle and both try and find jobs, as glass blowers, or, we're considering moving. But the situation at Berkshire Glass changed pretty rapidly. And Nathan and I we were still dating. We weren't married yet. And we decided, we found a house actually just over the border in Canaan, New York. And we were able to buy it, and we purchased this house with the plan that, hey, this could be a great location if we ever had a studio. Because I think we both really, our hopes and dreams were like having our own shop and not having to work for other people. And so we bought this house, and then Berkshire Glass, which was employing us, turned into more of a cooperative situation. So we were no longer employed working for them. And, but we were able to co-op we would spend, 5 hours at the hot shop making glass for their gallery. And then we would spend, the same amount of time making our own work. So they had set up a situation where it was like a trade bartering situation. So we were able to continue to make work. And from our house, every couple times a year, we'd have these tent sales out in front of our house with a big tent. And we had way more space to store glass. But eventually we realized, the studio closed its doors completely. And then we had no studio to work in. So Nathan and I were like, whoa, we've been doing this for a lot of years. I think we have to build our own studio. So we had to go through the whole process of that, which was pretty labor intensive, getting all the permits, and, talking to our neighbors and putting up a building. And that took several years. At that point, we had gotten married and we had had our first child, and we were in the process of building our own shop. So there was like a big kind of break in between when Berkshire Glass closed and when our studio opened. And our studio was finally finished and we opened it in 2008.
Your studio is private, right? So you just make your stuff at your studio, or are you open to the public, and do you have a gallery?
So our studio is a 1,000 square foot barn in our backyard, and it is open to the public. That originally wasn't our plan. It was just going to be where we worked, and we were going to create a body of work and do the wholesale shows. We weren't really going to be open to the public, but because it was 2008, there was that huge economic downturn, and a lot of the shows got canceled and a lot of galleries closed. So we changed our business model pretty much on the fly and decided we have to have a gallery, we have to sell directly, because that was the only way. We couldn't, take stuff to the shows because the shows were really doing quite poorly. And that was too risky for us as a new business. So we set up half of our studio, like 500 square feet is a gallery, and the other half is our hot shop, and it's all one big open room. We have a small cold working shop and storage off the right back corner of our shop. But for the most part, it's a big open studio. We're open to the public 6 days a week. Sometimes that changes depending on the season because it's very tourism-based area here. So in the winters, we tend to be closed, or we keep the hot shop running and we do bigger projects in the winter, or maybe we'll change out the crucible and do equipment repair or upgrade the gallery. So every winter, it's kind of like a nice break actually for us. But the rest of the year, we're open to the public. My husband teaches classes, and he and I are in there pretty much making whatever we want to make, which is really wonderful. And we sell everything directly, right from the gallery. So that's kind of how we've run our business, and we've done very well. And we've been open for 13 years, which is pretty incredible. I feel super lucky to be able to have that. Yeah.
And with all of your experience, how do you price your work?
So that's a great question. Pricing has always been kind of a tricky subject. I think Nathan and I have been really lucky because before we even had our own studio, we were able to sell work through the gallery where we were working at Berkshire Glass. So that gave us an idea of what kind of prices we could get for some of the pieces we're making. Once we opened our own shop, all of a sudden you have all these bills rolling in, and you have to scramble to do whatever you can to pay for everything to keep things running. So when we opened, we made everything. We made all of the bread and butter, kind of lower end items that people could come in and, they could get a set of cups or a nice paperweight or a small gift, an ornament or a sun catcher. So we made, and we still make all of those items. We want to have something for everyone in our shop. But over the years, that's kind of changed because we've really tried to work on larger scale work, museum quality pieces, things that command a much higher price. And I think that the longer we've been blowing glass together, that we have built up a following of people who actually collect our work. And so, we see these people year after year, every couple of years, and they want a newer, bigger piece, or they want something that's very stylized, or they order something from us. So when we first started pricing our work, we just kind of we had each other to bounce price points off of. And whoever kind of said, oh, I think it should be more, would win out. We kind of had to establish some rules, and of course that always changes. Pricing is so hard, but you have to understand really who your customer base is, who's buying the work, and also what the market will bear. What are pieces like mine selling for? Can you find a piece like the pieces I've made? So just looking at other people's work and trying to figure out where do I fit in that situation.
What's it like having your studio open to the public and also at your home? Like, how do you ever find a life balance? And like, do you ever have any privacy?
Oh my gosh, Dominique, it is so difficult. So when we were younger, before we had kids, we were like, oh yeah, we'll have a hot shop in our backyard. It'll be awesome. Oh, we'll be open to the public. We'll just have to walk outside and, we can blow glass and we can sell work right there. And it's been great. But over the years, it gets harder and harder because you always have people coming on your property to your house, even when you're not open. So we have people knocking on my front doors. This is the glass studio. No, it's in the back. Or we have a lot of people who, are like, why aren't you open today? And so it's hard to separate. Nathan and I had a lot of arguments and disagreements in the beginning because it was really hard. It was like when your work is right in your backyard, it's hard to not always be in work mode and thinking about work. And so much of what we did was work. We'd work during the day and we'd come home at night, but we'd have to run out and check the furnace or, so that's been really hard. The other part of it is over the last few years, Nathan and I have really considered wanting to move to a different town. And it just seems impossible because the studio is so grounded and so rooted here. And it would be really so hard to find a property where we could set up another studio. And then how do you get everyone to go over to that area? So sometimes it can definitely make us feel a little bit trapped here when we have to have, business hours, retail hours, and be open. And just many times we're waiting. We're just waiting to see if people come. So that can be really difficult for both of us because there's so many things we'd rather be doing. And we feel really stuck at home, stuck at the shop, taking care of it. And it's just been two of us. We've never had any employees. So it's not like we can take off and leave and have a gallery person or another glassblower in there selling stuff. We haven't done that either. So it's been difficult. If I could do it over again, I don't know. It might be better to have a studio somewhere other than my home. But then, it's a blessing and a curse because COVID, right? When COVID happened last year, both of our children were pulled out of school. And guess what? It didn't really change much for us because we're home here anyway. So if we had a studio somewhere else and we had to drive there and, that would have been a disaster. And if we're paying for a lease somewhere else, and it would have been really difficult because when the kids were pulled out of school, everything changed, for our shop here. Basically, and we couldn't be open. Nathan couldn't teach classes. And both of our kids, especially our daughter, Jane, I needed to be here helping her doing remote schooling as a fourth grader. So it was not the easiest thing to get through, basically. Yeah.
And okay, so kind of touching on that, how do you, most of the moms we talk to, neither of us are parents, but most of the moms that we talk to deal with mom guilt. and especially with COVID and your kids being home, and how do you deal with that?
Well, for me, that's a really interesting question, because I've never really felt guilty about wanting to be in the shop blowing glass. I don't feel like me choosing my career is like in direct competition with me choosing my children. And I think that because we've set up our studio work-life situation to be in this bubble, that we're always kind of here, like our kids know that we're in the shop working, or our kids know that I'm here for them. And I think in the beginning, when we first opened our studio and my son was 3, I mean, there were times I blew glass all through my pregnancy for both kids. I blew glass with my son in a backpack on my back. Customers would come in and be like, is she really like dropping on a foot with a kid on her back? It was very funny. And when I think about that, I'm like, oh, that was so sweet. But, I think as a new mom, I felt the struggle was real, to feel like I cannot do all of this, because when you have kids, they have a lot of needs and a lot of requirements. And I felt very much like, oh my gosh, like I have to be this mom, stay-at-home mom, and I have to like do everything for them. And so in reality, I definitely have struggled with that part of it throughout my whole career. And I've spent a lot of time going back and forth, kind of stepping away from the glass blowing and the studio just to be a full-time mom and a homemaker. And then being able to go back to the studio, I think I had to come to realize that I can't be a full-time glass blower and artist and be creative all the time, and then also be a full-time mom and homemaker and wife and take care of all of the needs of the household. So it's really hard to find balance between those two things, but I think I have definitely allowed myself to do both. And luckily my husband is, very supportive, and he picks up the slack when I'm not out there. Sometimes he's out there making stuff alone, and sometimes he's in here with the kids and I go out and make stuff alone. And I think over the years, we've both gotten really good at working alone, which is it's great, but it's also kind of sad because we want to make stuff together. But we've also been kind of lucky because my family and his family live kind of nearby, and they're very supportive. And sometimes we've asked them for help. So they'll come and, take care of the kids, especially when they were younger, while we would both be able to work. So that's, I think, it's just important to recognize when you need to reach out for help from family or friends to step in and give you some space to be able to be out in the shop again together, making cool stuff. Yeah.
What's it like working in the same industry as your partner? Do you have to find a groove together? Do you find that you have different personalities so that you can work together well, or?
Yeah, I think so Nathan and I have known each other for 22 years, and it's changed a lot, obviously, like any relationship. And I think early in the very beginning, our relationship, it was very my things are my things and your things are your things, and let's keep them separate and we'll sell separately. And then it just all became, well, now we're working, we're collaborating, and we're, I'm adding this part to your piece and you're adding this part to my piece. And, and then, eventually it comes down to why are you using that color? Or I hate that, that's a weird shape, So things evolve. And obviously, Nathan is, first of all, I'm a short little person, and Nathan's nice and tall. So certain things he just does much better than me. if I'm working on a huge piece, I'll have him assisting me, helping big time doing reheats. And yeah, we have to get into a groove. I mean, a lot of what we do is kind of on the fly. So we do a lot of scheduling, like, hey, let's make these pieces on this day, or, oh, we're almost out of paperweights, or, oh, you know, let's make some bigger work next week, or we have this order, you know, for these things. We always do all the orders first. So, but definitely, you know, Nathan's the gaffer a lot of times, and I'm doing all the starts and assisting him. And then we switch roles, and we both have very different temperaments. So Nathan's a perfectionist. He really, it has to be like no funny spots, you know, like it has to be right on center and open just the right diameter. And he's a measurer. He uses calipers, and, you know, he's like so good like that. But I'm like eyeballing it, you know, I'm just, I like things that are a little funny or weird, you know, and so I'm much more free-spirited and kind of like let things be a little funky, or I don't care if there's a little bubble in it, someone will love it, you know. So we definitely have different approaches to working with glass, and like we can both make each other's work, which is kind of cool. So the things he makes, I can flip around and make those too if someone was like, hey, make this for me. And the same goes for me. And I think we work really well together because we're kind of opposites. But then sometimes it doesn't go well, and we spend some time working alone in the shop when that happens. That's how we handle it. Yeah.
Do you think that people treat you differently than him because you're working together so much? Do you think as a woman that people like approach you in a different manner?
I think that for years, I really felt that way. I felt that things were really unbalanced. From all my experiences, from my very first job blowing glass full time up until probably maybe, I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, even in my own studio, where people would walk in and question if I was really the glass blower or not want to talk to me. They only asked Nathan questions. So, I mean, I've always kind of felt like I had to be tougher and stand up for myself and, you know, speak up and let it be known that women blow glass too, and that we can make really great stuff, and that we know what we're doing, and we understand the equipment, and, you know, and just kind of educate people. I think like any profession, a lot of people assume that, oh, this like mostly guys just do this, or, you know, girls don't. You know, in Europe, I think it's very unlikely to walk into a shop in Murano and see women working, right? So, I mean, maybe I'm wrong because I haven't been there. You've been there though, right? But I haven't been there. But, you know, I think for me, it was hard. And I always just had to stand up for myself more as a woman working in glass, because there's a lot of egos in the hot shop, you know, there really is. So yeah, you just got to be tough.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. But you can't go to Murano, like shut down your whole business and pack up your whole farm and go. Come on now.
That's so unreasonable.
Come on, I wish. I mean, everybody, do you know how often customers come in? Oh, have you been to Murano? Well,
yeah. Have you seen the real glass blowers?
I'm too busy blowing glass for you.
I know, seriously. I mean, one day we considered going to the conference, but things got too crazy here to be able to leave. So yeah, it was kind of a bummer to miss that because it sounded excellent. We don't do a lot of traveling. We have all of our roots right here, and it's kind of hard to break free of them, for sure.
Do you ever feel stuck? Like, do you ever lose your creativity?
I definitely do. And I have. I think that when you pose this question to me, like through the email, I was like, wow. I feel like I was very, very creative before I owned my own shop. And once we opened our own gallery and studio, both Nathan and I love blowing glass, and we love doing it together. But we have a business to run too. So things got real pretty quickly. And we knew that we had to make things that would sell. So 95% of all of our income is from the work that we make and directly sell from our gallery here. And so it was important to us that we made something for everyone and could do repairs and do a few classes to fill in the gaps. But I think, creativity is really difficult because there's a lot of pressure on you to make things that the public would want. So I think Nathan and I have been really lucky that, we both have a pretty great design sense, I think, and a creative spirit. So we work a lot with a variation of shapes, but we play a lot with the color. That's kind of our thing, is we love certain forms. We try and make pieces that are bigger. Then we really spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about color. But we were much more free and creative when we didn't care whether or not stuff was selling. When you could just make whatever. You could make something that looked like an eggplant with an arm coming out, and it was fun to make, but could you sell it? I don't know. Is that going to pay the bills? So, and we've spent time like making Encolmo pieces, or, things that are much more labor intensive, Marini pieces. But it's really fun to do those things, but then are they going to easily sell? So, we've tried to come up with a product line as creative as we can. And we always spend a lot of time trying to change the shape a little or change the colors a little. But I feel like last year, with everything with our studio kind of getting shut down and our kids being home, I just had to step away from being creative. I barely made any glass in 2020. And we were open here and there, but it was really hard to accept that I'm not feeling creative at all. I'm empty in the creative side of things. And I think, all artists go through that. And I think that the public, the general public, people who aren't in the arts, kind of think that, we're always full of ideas and, that we can do anything anytime we want. And boy, how did we figure this out? And the reality is it's very up and down. So you can be really creative and trying new work. And then you can feel deflated, like this stuff isn't selling and I loved making it, but nobody wants to buy it. And, and you have no new ideas. So that's been kind of rough. I think you just have to accept it for what it is. That's how I am, at least. I try not to get overwhelmed by that feeling, because you just have to accept, when things aren't right and you're not feeling like you want to make glass, or you're not feeling like you have any great ideas, just to be in that space and deal with it. And eventually things will change, I think. At least that's how I feel about it. So
thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to know, what is your definition of success? Or do you feel like you've reached your own personal definition of success?
So for me, I feel like I have reached my own personal definition of success. I have always wanted to be a glass blower, and I am one. I have a beautiful family and kids and an incredible shop in my backyard where I can go and make glass and make what I want to make. And not worry too much about, how things will be taken care of. And I have a very great partner in my husband who also blows glass. I mean, for me, I feel like this is a huge success. And I feel really grateful and so blessed to have what I have in my life. I think it's been awesome. It's worked out really well. I wish that I could have more balance where it wasn't all work or all home time, where I could be able to get out and travel more and see more and experience more and connect with more people. But I think your podcast is a great opportunity to connect with more people too. So I'm always working towards bigger, better things and, hoping that, I will continue to make glass until I cannot make until I'm a little old lady. That's what I hope. That will be even more of a success for me. Yeah.
So nice to just appreciate where you are, but then know that you have more desires, but you can be grateful for what you have now.
Yeah. I think that's so great. If you want more, you're constantly unhappy. If you want your business to be bigger, better, greater, more, then you're not accepting where you are right now. Even when things are tough, I think it's time. For me, I read a lot of books about mindfulness and just accepting what is right now. And so, even if things are hard, you've got to accept it and then they will get better. I'm a big believer in just persevering, hanging in there, even through the tough times, and just really believing in what you're doing, finding the truth inside about why you're blowing glass. Why are you an artist? And just staying with that, even though it's hard. I mean, we all knew that being an artist would be really hard. It's not the career choice that everyone picks, So that part of it, I think it's just really important to accept everything the way it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not only an artist, but you're also a business owner. So it's a business owner that relies on your art.
That's right. It's been really, the scariest part for Nathan and I both is that we have all of our eggs in one basket. So from the day we opened our shop, we said, this has to succeed or else what are we going to do? That's what we've both been glass blowers and glass makers for 10 years. If this doesn't work, and it could very well have not worked, if this falls apart or our relationship falls apart or anything falls apart, then, it's done with. What would we do though? Because we both, all we ever wanted to do was make glass. So, it had to work. And I very much believe that if you believe it will work, it will, that it can turn out well. If you really believe that it will be fine, that it will be. Maybe that sounds really hokey.
No, I love it.
No, I really love that.
The law of attraction, build your reality.
Manifesting.
Totally. I'm all about manifesting it. You have to believe it for it to be true. Seriously, the more you believe it, it will become reality for you. So I'm a big proponent of that. Maybe, I think a lot of people think, that's maybe not true, but the more positive I am, the more people seem to pull in that driveway and buy glass from me. That's how it feels for me. I'm like, oh, it's a good day today. Oh, we're going to have more customers. Oh, we sold a bunch of stuff today. So yeah. Yep. I think we're all creatures of habit. And then we tend to do a lot of repeat the same behaviors over and over again. And it's hard to break that cycle, but I think you can, if you want things to be good, that you can believe them, that they will be good and it will happen. So, yeah.
That's so good.
Mm-hmm. Do you have is that like our wise words of wisdom to end on?
Yeah, wait, you have now you have to do a conclusion. That was a good conclusion already.
It probably sounded so silly, but that's
No,
No,
it
it
was
was
seriously how I
literally like so
feel.
good.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Thank you. No, this was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Connected in Glass. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more information on the artists we interview and for updates on the podcast.